Hi everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome back to the Clear Ads YouTube channel. Today we're going to be continuing our module on Introduction to Amazon Ads. This should be the 9th video, and this one in particular is going to be on understanding ACoS, TACoS, and calculating profitability, both on the ads platform and across the account as a whole. So, we've got 3 things to cover, so without further ado, let's do the first one. So, ACoS, or Advertising Cost on Sales, what is it? Well, essentially it comes down to it's a measurement of performance and profitability of your advertising. It tells you what percentage of your sales price was spent on advertising in order to get that sale based on your ad sales. So for example, if you're spending $3 on advertising to get a sale of a $12 product, you would have a ACoS of about 25%, in fact exactly 25%. Got by simply we just took that and it's $3 and it's just a 25% of 12. So there you have it. On top of that, it has a similarly link to the figure of ROAS, which you may have also heard, or return on ad spend, which is the ratio of spend to sales. So if we go back to our earlier example, we could either divide our sales by our spend, so the other way around, so 12 by 3, or we could divide 100 by our ACoS figure, or 25, both of which give us a return of 4. And now these figures are interchangeable, but as a general rule of thumb, you tend to see ACoS more on pay-per-click side of advertising, such as the sponsored campaigns, including brands and products, as well as some versions of sponsored display. And you see the return on ad spend figure more prominently on the CPM campaigns, such as sponsored display and DSP. So now we know what it is, how do we use it? So for a long time, this was used as the primary figure for account performance across most e-commerce, not just Amazon, but like the other platforms such as Facebook and Google as well. However, this isn't the case as much anymore. It still holds some value. However, metrics like TACoS and gross profit are much better at highlighting growth of the account as a whole, rather than just the sponsor side of things, because those figures include far more, and I'll get into that later. But ACoS is still very useful, and the particular uses of this figure depend entirely on the context you're looking at it in. So it can be broken down on numerous levels, which I'm just going to expand on shortly. But its primary function is going to be on the optimization of your ads account. So, what does it look like in an account? If we take it from the PPC side, it would look a bit like this. So here we have an account, name removed, and we can see that they spent roughly $39,000 to get $139,000 in sales. So similar to what we did earlier, instead of doing it on the product level or the search term level, we take spend across the entire account and every sale associated with an ad. And fortunately, a lot of ads platforms will calculate that for you, because otherwise going in and doing product A, we spent £10 on keyword Y for product A, and just doing that for massive catalogs would simply not be feasible. But yeah, so it's a good performance indicator for the PPC side, but not so much as the account as a whole, which I mentioned earlier. As you know, for example, you could see improvements in ACoS week on week, like it could be going 28, 25, 24, but and while it is tempting to look at that figure primarily, you should always take a more holistic approach, because, for example, a fall in ACoS could be showing a fall in spend, a fall in sales as well, but say if spend and sales are both falling at different rates, and if your goal is growing the account, a falling ACoS is not a good sign in that particular context. Furthermore, as there are some campaigns that can be affected by ad attribution, the figure for ACoS, you should always consider how much time has passed since the period that you looked into, because it can be subject to change. Much more so on platforms like DSP, but yeah, on this, if you have a lot of display campaigns on the PPC side, that can also be a problem. But yeah, having an account level target like this one here, say, for example, with this account at 30%, we're at 28%, it's a good general guide for bidding optimizations. On top of that, you can bring it down to the campaign level, and this will be in the overview section of the PPC campaign just here. So we can see we've got all our figures here. So spend for this particular campaign was 170 and we got 179. So we spent roughly 94% of all of our sales on ACoS, which is a bad sign. However, looking at it at a campaign level is good because if you look at it as a whole, you see every campaign above 30%, but say it might be a ranking campaign, or perhaps it's a product targeting campaign where you have to be more aggressive. So looking at it at this level, that's also quite useful. Similarly, you can break it down even further. You can go onto the targeting tab and collect things see with this one, loose match, this particular keyword on this particular term, and you can also do it on products tab for the search term to see there. So if we look at the terms from loose match, and you'll also be able to see things like product targets as well as keywords that you're targeting, and you can break it down by ACoS and then see, are you spending too much on that keyword? Are you spending too little on that keyword? Are there keywords that are doing really well and the budget needs to be shifted between the two? Are there match types that aren't working? For example, if your product has low reviews, you can expect things like substitutes and complements targeting in automatic campaigns, like where this one's come from, to not be doing as well. Similarly, with the product level, you can go in and see if something has a really high ACoS on the product level, it might be that color is simply not profitable, so you could advertise others. Which brings us to TACoS, our second figure. In recent years, a lot of advertisers and agencies have started to put a lot more stock in a different figure, which is TACoS, or total ACoS, which we're going to go over now. So total ACoS, or total advertising cost on sale, is essentially calculated in a very similar way, except you use all sales across the platform that you're advertising on, rather than just the ones acquired directly through a sponsored product, display, clicks, or any click and sale that was attributed to an advert. So your organic sales as well. So for TACoS, if we go back to our earlier example where we have our £3 product and it generated £12 in ad sales, and let's say we go back to business reports and we found that it has a total sales of 30, which the 12 is included in, by running the same calculation again, 3 over 30, we get a TACoS of 10%. Now this gives you a very good indication of a lot more things. For example, if you're taking into account total sales, you can see if your sales are increasing week on week. You can see whether or not you're spending too much on any particular terms in the account level. And it's also really useful when you're building out campaigns like defensive and remarketing, where there is a chance of you going after things you are already converting for quite well on the organic side, and they're almost cannibalizing your own one, so it's a good way of showing whether that's occurring if it's above certain thresholds. So, TACoS, or it's also recorded as real ACoS on some platforms, so similar to what I mentioned above, you can break it down to different levels. For example, you can do it as the parent level ACoS for products, or parent level TACoS for all products, and you can also do it by ASIN specific level. Now, unfortunately, platforms such as Amazon do not include this figure on your platforms, so in order to find it, you would need to get everything you're spending on that particular product, then hop from the PPC side and the DSP side, then you would have to hop over to the business report side, get sales, and then calculate it by that. So that's going to be very time consuming. So that's why a lot of people, I think, go for ACoS still, because it is a readily available figure. However, there are a few ways around this. For example, a few paid tools like Sellerboard can pull a lot of this data directly from Amazon's API and sort it out. Now, how can you use it? So at the parent level, it's really interesting. You can have a parent level TACoS of 5.34%, and that's really good. So that gives you a general view of what's doing well across every color of your product, everything where it has a shared listing. And then if it's quite high, you can see, oh, well, this particular product simply doesn't work. And if you look at it at the child level, you can see, oh, maybe the parent level is being spiked by one particular child ASIN. For example, maybe there's one color that keeps getting clicked on, but another product is the one getting the sale. So there are lots of ways you can use this data to further optimize your account. For example, if one color has the highest conversion, it makes more sense to simply target that one, because the people who want the other colors are still going to find the product, but the most profitable one means you're going to have a much better conversion rate overall. So we bring to our third and final of the topics: profitability, costs and margins. So earlier we saw we were roughly making 4 times what we put in with regard to the £3 product for advertising and £12 product. And while that initially seems very profitable, we haven't taken into account Amazon fees, delivery costs, or anything that it took to produce that good. If we continue our example from earlier and say this hypothetical good costs, say, £6 to produce and has a cost of goods sold of £3 per unit, that brings us, we're spending about £9 for every £12 sale, and then we subtract that, we get from our listing price, we get our margin. Now this is something very important to consider when putting down your targets. The only downside of keeping an eye on this sort of thing is that your prices and your fees, they're going to be subject to change. They're not going to be set in stone. So that's something you've really got to keep an eye on. For example, say if there's a Black Friday sale, there's gonna be deal fees, and on top of that, your price is gonna go down, so you're gonna be losing margin. On top of that, maybe Amazon changes the way that they ship your products, and maybe they put it in a bigger box, and as a result, you're paying more for delivery. Or say, for example, it could go the other way. Like, for example, if you're doing really well in terms of sales, you might be able to bulk ship more, which will bring your costs down, and then those margins will change. So when you're choosing targets for ACoS and TACoS, which I'll get into a bit more shortly, it's important to consider the most up-to-date margins, the most up-to-date cost of goods and all that. So similar with other tools you can find there, with these sorts of profitability, you can collect figures like gross profit and net profit, which include the actual amount of money you're making as a seller, or how much your client's making if you're an agency. And you see we've got our margins here, our profits and our gross profits there, from the example taken earlier. So, like I said earlier, when determining the sorts of ACoS and TACoS targets you put together, you should always consider your margins that we went over shortly a little while ago. So, say you're selling a £10 product, but if you're losing £7 every time, any advert that costs you more than £3, complete waste. So you calculate roughly 30%, that's going to be your ACoS, at which effectively you're making no money on the product. And that's your break-even ACoS, which is quite often given as like an upper limit to allow for your ads. And the same can be done with TACoS. You should also consider what you want for each individual product, as well as what you want for the account as a whole when choosing a TACoS target. For example, if you simply want profitability and maintenance, general rule of thumb, optimizing towards 10% ACoS is probably going to work to you, as e-commerce has become a bit more competitive, and also if you're a particularly competitive industry, that can go all the way up to 15%, provided your margin's there. Similarly, if you want to grow your sales, you're going to have to get higher bids and broader targeting, which means you're going to have to go for targets such as 15 or 20%. And on top of that, with particular things, that may be different on product and account level. So you might really want to pull down costs on one set of products, and then you want to push, say, another. So you always have to consider these sorts of things when you're putting the targets in place, which you will then go on to optimize to. But yeah, so when to use each, in terms of when you should use each, it's ACoS is better for advertising the Amazon platform. Just make sure there's nothing above your break-evens. Make sure that everything you're doing works for that. And also, when you're looking at your TACoS targets, you should also consider the industry you're in. For example, if your goods are repurchasable, like supplements, you might have a really high lifetime value for the customer. For example, if you spend 100% of your sales price on getting a new customer, but they go on to repurchase your same product organically for the next 6 months, you are considerably up on the deal thanks to the lifetime value of those products. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the video. So today in our summary, we're just going to go over the quick points. Yeah. So the ACoS is best for individual optimizations at the search term level, but the purpose of the campaign should always be considered. TACoS gives you a much clearer picture of the account health as a whole. Targets for both should be largely determined by your margins and what your or your client's goals are. And always be aware that the product's margins, as well as factors that might affect them, sales, vouchers, fees, and others. And of course, best practice, as always, is to keep tabs of all of these figures. While this is time consuming, there are numerous tools available to streamline the process.